In the hallowed silence of the Kennedy Center Concert Hall, where presidents and dignitaries have witnessed history's greatest performances, a single spotlight cut through the darkness like a blade. 2,500 pairs of eyes fixed on the figure emerging from the wings, a woman whose trembling hands contradicted the regal posture she fought to maintain. Naomi Rivers, 34 years old, stepped onto that stage, carrying a weight invisible to the audience, a burden that had crushed her once before and threatened to do so again. Her fingers, long and elegant, shook as they hovered above the keys of the Steinway grand piano. Those same fingers that had once been restrained in a psychiatric ward, bound to prevent her from harming herself. 12 years ago, those hands had been deemed too damaged to ever create beauty again. Yet here she stood, in one of the world's most prestigious venues, about to attempt the impossible. The silence stretched pregnant with anticipation and doubt. Some in the audience knew her story, the whispered legend of the prodigy who vanished, the girl genius who lost her mind. Others simply waited curious about this relatively unknown pianist who had somehow earned a coveted spot in the Kennedy Center's Rising Phoenix series. Naomi closed her eyes. In that moment, she wasn't in Washington, D.C. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere darker, somewhere that had almost destroyed her. And to understand how she arrived at this precipice between triumph and collapse, we must go back. Back to where it all fell apart. Naomi Rivers grew up in a 3-bedroom row house in East Baltimore, where gunshots punctuated summer nights, and the closest thing to music was the gospel choir at New Hope Baptist Church. Her mother, Denise, cleaned houses for wealthy families in the suburbs. Her father had left before Naomi's 2nd birthday, leaving behind only a last name and a photograph that Denise kept hidden in a drawer. The Rivers family had nothing, which is to say they had everything that poverty allows: love, faith, and dreams that felt simultaneously vital and impossible. Naomi's mother worked 12-hour days so her children could have full stomachs and clean clothes. Her older sister Jasmine protected them on the walk to school. And her younger brother Caleb smiled with such radiant innocence that neighbors called him Little Sunshine. Everything changed on a Sunday morning when Naomi was 6 years old. The church pianist, Mrs. Henderson, had suffered a stroke the night before, and the congregation sat in confused silence when the opening hymn arrived with no accompaniment. Without thinking, without permission, Naomi walked to the piano bench. She had never taken a lesson. She had never touched a piano before, except to dust it when her mother cleaned the Jenkins house. What emerged from her tiny fingers was nothing short of miraculous. The melody of His Eye is on the Sparrow filled the sanctuary, not perfect, but pure, each note finding its place as if guided by some divine hand. The congregation froze, then erupted. Denise Rivers fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, thanking God for this gift, this impossible, beautiful gift. Within weeks, the story spread beyond East Baltimore. A local music teacher, Professor Catherine Reynolds from the Peabody Institute, heard about the child prodigy playing by ear at a storefront church. She came, she listened, and she wept. The next day, she offered Naomi a full scholarship. By age 10, Naomi was performing at regional competitions, winning every single one. By 12, she had mastered repertoire that conservatory students struggled with at 20. By 14, she received a letter that would change everything: a full scholarship to the Juilliard School in New York City. Denise quit her cleaning jobs to move with Naomi to Manhattan, leaving Jasmine and Caleb with their grandmother in Baltimore. The sacrifice tore their family apart geographically, but united them in purpose Naomi would be the one to make it to escape, to prove that brilliance could bloom even in the hardest soil. At Juilliard, Naomi thrived. Her instructors called her otherworldly, her technique flawless, but her emotional depth even more remarkable. She didn't just play music, she inhabited it, transformed it, made audiences feel things they didn't know they could feel. Critics began comparing her to the greats not as hyperbole, but as legitimate assessment. At 16, she was offered her first major concert, a solo performance at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. The night of that concert, Naomi wore a midnight blue gown that her mother had saved for months to afford. She played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the kind of maturity that should have been impossible for someone so young. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. The New York Times called her the most promising young pianist of her generation. Record labels circled. Concert halls began booking dates years in advance. Naomi Rivers, the girl from East Baltimore, who had nothing, suddenly had everything. And everything, as it turned out, was far more fragile than poverty had ever been. 3 weeks after her triumph at BAM, Naomi's family came to New York for a rare visit. Caleb, now 12 years old, had begged to see his sister perform. He had missed her Brooklyn concert because of school, and the disappointment in his voice during their phone calls had broken Naomi's heart. So when a smaller venue, the Baruch Performing Arts Center, offered her a spot in their Emerging Artists series, she accepted immediately. This one would be for Caleb. The concert was on a Friday evening in March. Caleb sat in the third row wearing a suit that was slightly too large, borrowed from a church deacon. His eyes never left his sister. Afterward, as Naomi took her bows, she spotted him in the audience and blew him a kiss. His smile, that radiant little sunshine smile, was the last purely joyful thing she would see for years. The family decided to walk back to the subway together. It was a mild evening spring beginning to assert itself over winter's grip. They were laughing, celebrating, discussing where to get late-night food. Jasmine was teasing Caleb about how he had cried during Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Denise was planning how they would spend the small performance fee Naomi had earned. They never heard the argument that had started half a block behind them. They never saw the two young men whose dispute had escalated beyond words. They only heard the gunshots, 3 rapid cracks that silenced the street. People screamed, scattered, dropped to the ground. Naomi turned and saw her brother falling, a bloom of red spreading across the borrowed suit jacket. She caught him before he hit the pavement, his weight suddenly impossible in her arms. "Naomi," he whispered, blood on his lips. "That was beautiful. You were so beautiful." Those were the last words Caleb Rivers spoke. He died on a New York City sidewalk 3 blocks from a concert hall, killed by a bullet meant for someone else's collateral damage in a conflict he had nothing to do with. He was 12 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. He died smiling at his sister. The police came. The ambulances arrived too late. Witnesses gave statements that contradicted each other. The shooters were never found. The case went cold within 6 months. Just another unsolved homicide in a city full of them. Just another black boy dead too young. But for Naomi, time stopped that night. In the hospital waiting room, still covered in her brother's blood, she began to scream. Not words, just sound, raw and primal and endless. Security had to restrain her. They sedated her. When she woke, the first thing she heard was a piano playing somewhere in the hospital, some therapy room or waiting area, and the sound sent her into a panic attack so severe that they sedated her again. The funeral was held at New Hope Baptist in Baltimore. Naomi didn't attend. She couldn't. The moment anyone tried to take her near a church, near music, near anything that reminded her of that night, she collapsed. The doctors called it acute stress reaction. They said she needed time. What they didn't say, what nobody wanted to say, was that something fundamental had broken inside Naomi Rivers, something that might never be repaired. For 6 months, Naomi existed in a gray twilight between living and dying. She moved back to Baltimore with her mother occupying Caleb's old bedroom because she couldn't bear to sleep in her own. The walls still had his posters, basketball players, superheroes, a single photograph of Naomi at her Juilliard audition. She would stare at that photo for hours, unable to recognize the confident girl in the image as herself. She stopped playing piano entirely. The instrument her mother had scraped together money to rent sat in their living room, untouched, gathering dust. Neighbors would ask Denise about Naomi's music, and Denise would change the subject, her eyes filled with a grief that went beyond losing one child to encompassing the loss of another who was still physically present but spiritually absent. The trauma manifested in ways that terrified everyone who loved her. Naomi would wake screaming from nightmares where gunshots mixed with piano chords, where every keystroke sounded like the crack of a pistol. She lost 40 pounds. She stopped bathing regularly. She would have conversations with Caleb, setting a place for him at dinner, laughing at jokes only she could hear. Jasmine tried everything to reach her sister. She played gospel music softly in the house, hoping to rekindle that old connection. Naomi fled to her room, hands over her ears, hyperventilating. She brought photographs from happier times. Naomi stared through them as if they were transparent. She even tried tough love anger, demanding that Naomi stop abandoning their family the way their father had. Naomi didn't respond. She had retreated somewhere none of them could follow. The first suicide attempt happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Denise came home from a job interview to find Naomi in the bathroom, a bottle of pills scattered across the floor, vomit in the sink. The ambulance arrived in time. They pumped her stomach. A psychiatric evaluation deemed her a danger to herself. The next morning, 2 orderlies escorted Naomi Rivers to Shepherd Pratt Hospital's acute psychiatric unit. She was 18 years old. 2 years earlier, she had been called the most promising pianist of her generation. Now she was patient 47B in a locked ward under 24-hour observation. Her shoelaces confiscated, her future reduced to the next 15-minute safety check. The initial diagnosis was post-traumatic stress disorder, severe major depression, and survivor's guilt so profound that it had manifested as what psychiatrists called trauma-induced psychosis. In simpler terms, Naomi's mind had fractured under the weight of witnessing her brother's death, and the cracks had let in ghosts' hallucinations, a constant replay of that night that felt more real than reality itself. They tried medications, antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers. Some dulled her pain, but also dulled everything else, leaving her numb and disconnected. Others triggered side effects, tremors, that mocked her former precision drowsiness, that swallowed entire days. The combination that eventually helped took 3 months to calibrate, and even then helped was a generous description. She stopped hearing Caleb's voice constantly. The nightmares decreased from every night to 3 or 4 times a week. She could shower without supervision, but the music was gone. Completely gone. When therapists suggested music therapy, Naomi refused so violently that they noted patient becomes agitated and potentially dangerous when music is mentioned in her chart. The piano, the thing that had once defined her, had become inextricably linked with the worst moment of her life. In her mind, the two were fused. Her talent had killed her brother. If she hadn't insisted on that concert, if she hadn't needed Caleb to see her perform, If she had just been content to be ordinary, he would still be alive. This was the twisted logic of trauma, irrational, but unshakable. And it kept Naomi locked in that hospital for what would become 3.5 years. The psychiatric ward at Shepherd Pratt was nothing like the hospitals shown in movies. There were no padded rooms or straitjackets. No one flew over the cuckoo's nest melodrama. Instead, it was profoundly, devastatingly ordinary. Beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed constantly, a day room with outdated magazines, and a television that only played approved channels, meals at scheduled times, medications distributed in small paper cups, group therapy sessions where people spoke in the flat tones of the heavily medicated. Naomi spent her first 6 months barely speaking. She attended the required sessions, took her pills, went through the motions of treatment, while remaining emotionally absent. Therapists came and went. Some were kind, others clinically detached, all of them ultimately ineffective. She cycled through 5 different psychiatrists, each one adjusting her medication cocktail, each one documenting minimal progress. Then, in month 7, Dr. Margaret Sullivan arrived. Dr. Sullivan was 53 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of calm presence that comes from decades of sitting with people in their darkest moments. She had recently joined Shepherd Pratt after working at McLean Hospital in Massachusetts, and she was known for taking on the most difficult cases the patient's other doctors had quietly given up on. Their first session was unremarkable. Dr. Sullivan introduced herself, explained her approach, asked standard intake questions. Naomi gave monosyllabic responses, staring at a point just past the doctor's left shoulder. The session ended after 30 minutes with nothing accomplished. The second session began the same way. But then Dr. Sullivan did something unexpected. She stopped asking questions. Instead, she said, "I lost my son when he was 15. Drunk driver ran a red light. Matthew died instantly. The driver survived without a scratch." Naomi's eyes focused for the first time in months. Dr. Sullivan continued, "For 2 years after that, I couldn't function. I left my practice. I stopped seeing friends. I wanted to die every single day. I'm telling you this not to compare our pain, because pain isn't a competition, but to tell you that I understand what it's like when grief becomes your entire world." Did it get better? Naomi's voice was rusty from disuse. "It got different," Dr. Sullivan replied. "Not better. Different. I learned to carry it instead of letting it carry me. But it took time, and it took being honest about what I had lost and what I could never get back." It was the first honest conversation Naomi had had since entering the hospital. And it was the beginning of something that would eventually save her life, though neither of them knew it yet. Over the following months, Dr. Sullivan worked with Naomi using an approach that differed from her predecessors. She didn't push music therapy. She didn't try to force Naomi to move on, or find closure phrases that had become meaningless cliches. Instead, she focused on something simpler, helping Naomi survive one day at a time. They talked about Caleb, not avoiding his memory, but sitting with it, examining it from every angle. Dr. Sullivan encouraged Naomi to tell stories about her brother, the funny ones, the sad ones, the ordinary moments that felt extraordinary in retrospect. Slowly, Caleb transformed in Naomi's mind from a source of pure anguish into a fuller memory, someone who had existed beyond that terrible last moment. They talked about survivor's guilt, that toxic cocktail of shame and self-blame that poisoned every thought. Dr. Sullivan didn't try to convince Naomi that Caleb's death wasn't her fault. She knew from experience that logic doesn't penetrate trauma. Instead, she asked questions. If the situation were reversed, if you had been killed and Caleb survived, would you want him to stop living? Would you want his talent to die with you? The answer, of course, was no. Naomi would never want that. But knowing it intellectually and feeling it emotionally were separated by a vast chasm that would take months more to bridge. 18 months into treatment, Naomi had progressed to the point where she could leave the acute ward for the hospital's residential program. She had her own room, more freedom, the ability to go outside in the courtyard. Her medications had stabilized. The nightmares persisted, but with less frequency. She had started to remember what it felt like to be a person rather than a collection of symptoms. But she still refused anything related to music. The hospital had a music therapy program, and she would take elaborate routes to avoid walking past that wing. When other patients played guitar in the day room, she retreated to her bedroom. Music was the one topic that remained completely off limits, and Dr. Sullivan wisely didn't push it. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon in October. Naomi was in the courtyard reading a book she wasn't really absorbing when she heard it. Faint, distant, carried on the autumn breeze someone playing piano. The music was coming from the occupational therapy building, a separate structure about 100 yards away. Another patient, someone in a different program, was practicing. The melody was simple, almost childlike. Twinkle. Twinkle Little Star played with hesitant fingers and frequent mistakes. Naomi's first instinct was to run. Every muscle tensed, her breathing accelerated, panic rising like a familiar old enemy. But something kept her frozen in place. Maybe it was the imperfection of the playing so different from the virtuosic performances that haunted her memories. Maybe it was the innocence of the song, something Caleb might have played when he was small. She listened. And as she listened, something unexpected happened. She began to cry. Not the violent, gasping sobs of her early days in the hospital, but quiet tears that felt like release rather than pain. For the first time since Caleb's death, music didn't trigger pure terror. It triggered something more complex, grief. Yes, but also memory connection, a sense of something that had been beautiful before it became terrible. Dr. Sullivan found her there an hour later, still sitting on the bench, tears drying on her cheeks. "I heard it," Naomi whispered. "I heard piano, and I didn't run away." That evening in their session, Dr. Sullivan made a decision. It was time to tell Naomi something she had been holding back, waiting for the right moment. "I need to share something with you," she said. "After Matthew died, I quit my practice. I told you that. What I didn't tell you is what brought me back, what Naomi asked." "Music," Dr. Sullivan replied. "Matthew played cello. After he died, I couldn't listen to music at all. But about 3 years after his death, I was in a grocery store, and they were playing some generic instrumental piece over the speakers, and I realized I was humming along. It was unconscious. My body remembered how to respond to music even though my mind was still protecting itself." She leaned forward. "Naomi, the thing that broke you is also the thing that can help heal you. Not erase the pain, not bring Caleb back, but help you carry what happened in a way that doesn't destroy you. Music isn't your enemy. It was there when Caleb died, but it was also there for every beautiful moment you shared with him." "I can't," Naomi said, but her voice lacked the usual conviction. "Not today," Dr. Sullivan agreed, "but maybe someday. And when that day comes, even if it's just one note, one key pressed on a piano, I'll be proud of you." 3 weeks later, Naomi made a request that shocked the entire treatment team. She wanted to go to the music therapy room. Just to look, she insisted. Not to play, just to be in the same space as a piano without falling apart. Dr. Sullivan accompanied her. The room was empty, a small space with a modest upright piano, some guitars on stands, a keyboard in the corner. Naomi stood in the doorway for 5 full minutes, breathing deeply, fighting the urge to flee. Then slowly, she stepped inside. The piano sat against the far wall, its keys covered. Naomi approached like it was a dangerous animal that might attack. She stood in front of it for another few minutes, then reached out and lifted the key cover. The black and white keys gleamed under the fluorescent lights. 88 keys that represented infinite possibilities. Naomi's hands trembled as she held them above the keys, not touching, just hovering. "One note," Dr. Sullivan said quietly. "That's all. Just one note." Naomi's right index finger descended. She pressed middle C. The sound rang out pure and clear, filling the small room. She pulled her hand back as if burned, gasping, but she didn't run. She stood there listening to that single note fade into silence, feeling something she hadn't felt in 2 years, the ghost of who she used to be, stirring somewhere deep inside. Recovery is never linear. That's what all the books and therapists say. But knowing it intellectually doesn't prepare you for how frustrating the reality can be. Naomi's journey back to music was measured in millimeters, and for every tiny victory, there were setbacks that felt like falling back to square one. After that first single note, it took 3 weeks before she could bring herself to enter the music therapy room again. This time she played a simple C major scale. Her fingers remembered the pattern, automatically muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice asserting itself. But halfway through, she had a flashback so vivid that she collapsed, hyperventilating, convinced she could smell gunpowder and blood. Dr. Sullivan rushed to her side, talking her through grounding techniques. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear. Slowly, Naomi came back to the present. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "It's too much. You just did it, Doctor. Did it," Sullivan pointed out. "You played music for the first time in 2 years. You had a panic attack, yes, but you survived it. You're still here." The next attempt came 2 weeks later. Then a week after that. Then 3 days. The intervals between her piano sessions grew shorter as her tolerance built. She started with scales and simple exercises, nothing that required emotion or interpretation. Just technical practice, rebuilding the foundation. But something interesting began to happen. During one session about 4 months after that first middle C, Naomi was working through Hanan exercises when she unconsciously transitioned into something else. Her fingers found the opening notes of Amazing Grace, the song she had played that first Sunday at New Hope Baptist Church when she was 6 years old. The realization of what she was playing hit her mid-phrase. But instead of stopping, instead of panicking, she kept going. The hymn poured out of her, not technically perfect, her fingers rusty and unpracticed, but infused with something she hadn't felt in years, genuine feeling. When she finished, she looked up at Dr. Sullivan with wonder. That's the song that started everything, she whispered. And it didn't hurt. It actually felt good. "Do you know why?" Dr. Sullivan asked. Naomi thought for a moment. Because it was never about the concert or success or impressing anyone. It was just about the music itself. Pure. Simple. It was a breakthrough, but not the end of the journey. Naomi still couldn't handle classical repertoire, the pieces she had performed professionally. Anything by Rachmaninoff, Chopin, or Beethoven triggered immediate anxiety. But gospel music, the foundation of her earliest connection to piano, became her safe harbor. She began spending more time in the music therapy room, working with the program's director, a gentle man named Thomas, who specialized in trauma recovery. Together they explored gospel spirituals hymns that Naomi had heard in church as a child. Music that felt like home, rather than performance connection, rather than achievement. Naomi discovered that certain keys and chord progressions affected her differently. Minor keys sometimes triggered sadness that spiraled into flashbacks. But major keys, especially the bright openness of C major and G major, felt manageable. She learned to recognize her triggers and navigate around them, building a mental map of what was safe and what was still too dangerous to approach. The other patients in the music therapy program became an unexpected support system. There was Angela, a former alcoholic who played guitar to manage her anxiety. Marcus, a veteran with PTSD, who found that drums helped regulate his hyper-aroused nervous system. They formed an informal group meeting several times a week, playing together, supporting each other through the rough sessions. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" Marcus asked Naomi one day. "You were great at this before everything went wrong. You lost something you had. The rest of us were just finding music for the first time as adults. But maybe that's not so different. We're all starting over in our own ways." It was a perspective Naomi hadn't considered. She had been so focused on what she had lost, the career destroyed, the prodigy silenced, that she hadn't thought about the possibility of finding something new. Not a return to her old life, but a different relationship with music entirely. By her third year at Shepherd, Pratt, Naomi had progressed enough to transition to the hospital's outpatient program. She moved into a supervised apartment with 2 other women in recovery, got a part-time job at a grocery store, and continued her therapy sessions twice a week. And every Sunday she's attended New Hope Baptist Church, sitting in the same pew where her mother had fallen to her knees thanking God for her daughter's gift. The current pianist at New Hope was competent, but uninspired. One Sunday after the service, Naomi approached Pastor Wilson, who had known her since she was a child. "I want to try," she said simply. "I want to play for the church again." Pastor Wilson was a 70-year-old man with eyes that had seen every form of human suffering and somehow maintained their kindness. He had also in his youth been a jazz pianist of some renown before answering what he called a higher calling. He looked at Naomi for a long moment, then nodded. "Next Sunday," he said. "We'd be honored." That next Sunday, Naomi's hands shook so badly that she could barely press the keys for the opening hymn. The congregation watched with a mixture of concern and hope, remembering the prodigy she had been aware of, the tragedy that had broken her. She made mistakes, fumbled transitions, had to restart one song entirely. But she finished. And when the service ended, the congregation gave her a standing ovation that had nothing to do with technical perfection and everything to do with courage. Pastor Wilson approached her afterward. "You play like someone who's been through fire," he said. "There's pain in every note, but also something else. Resilience, hope. That's more valuable than any amount of technique." He made her an offer play for the church regularly, and in exchange he would give her private lessons. "Not to make you the pianist you were," he clarified, "but to help you become the pianist you're meant to be now." Naomi accepted. Over the following months, Pastor Wilson became the mentor she desperately needed. Unlike her teachers at Juilliard, who had focused on perfection and virtuosity, he taught her about music as spiritual practice, as healing, as conversation with something larger than herself. "You know what your problem is?" he asked one afternoon during a lesson in the church's small practice room. "You think music is about playing notes perfectly, but music is about truth. And right now, your truth is that you've been broken and you're trying to put yourself back together. So play that, don't hide it." He introduced her to a different kind of classical music composers she had overlooked in her formal training, Florence Price, William Grant Still, Margaret Bonds. Black classical composers who had blended European forms with African American spiritual traditions. Music that felt like a bridge between her Juilliard education and her church upbringing. But more importantly, he encouraged her to compose. "You have something to say," he insisted. "You've lived through things most people can't imagine. That's not just trauma, it's wisdom. Express it." At first, Naomi resisted. Composing felt too exposing, too vulnerable. But late at night in the apartment she shared with her roommates, she found herself experimenting. Little fragments of melody chord progressions that expressed feelings she couldn't put into words. Slowly, tentatively, she began to create. Her first complete composition took 3 months to finish. It was only 2 minutes long, a simple piece for solo piano that she titled Caleb's Morning. It captured the feeling of her brother's smile, that radiant joy he had brought to everyone he met. When she played it for Pastor Wilson, he wept. "This," he said, pointing at the sheet music, "this is what you're meant to do. Not recreate your past, but build something new from it." 4 years after entering Shepherd Pratt Hospital, Naomi was officially discharged from treatment. Her medication regimen was stable. Her therapy continued on an outpatient basis, and she had rebuilt enough of her life to function independently. She moved into a small studio apartment in Baltimore, continued working part-time, and played at New Hope every Sunday. To the outside world, it might have looked like a modest life. The girl who had been destined for Carnegie Hall was now playing for a congregation of 70 people in a neighborhood church, working a register at Whole Foods, living in a 400-square-foot apartment. But for Naomi, it was everything. It was survival. It was peace. It was enough. Or at least she thought it was enough. Until one evening, 8 years after being discharged, she checked her email and found a message that would change everything again. The sender was someone she recognized, Victoria Chambers, one of the most influential classical music critics in America. Victoria had reviewed Naomi's Brooklyn Academy of Music performance 12 years ago, giving it a glowing write-up that had helped launch her career. The email subject line read, "An opportunity worth considering." Naomi's finger hovered over the delete button. She had worked so hard to build this small, safe life. She didn't need reminders of who she had been, didn't need opportunities that would only end in disappointment. But something made her open the email instead. "Dear Naomi," it read. "You don't know me personally, though I reviewed your performance at BAM many years ago. I've learned about your story, about what you've been through, and I want you to know that I've been following your progress from afar. I recently heard you play at New Hope Baptist, and I was moved in ways that your technically perfect performances never achieved. You play now with a depth of emotion that comes from genuine suffering and survival." The Kennedy Center is launching a new series called Rising Phoenix, featuring artists who have overcome significant challenges to continue creating. I've nominated you. They're interested. The performance would be solo full evening, your choice of repertoire. I understand if you're not ready or not interested, but I wanted you to know that the world would benefit from hearing what you've become. Sincerely, Victoria Chambers. Naomi read the email 3 times. Then she closed her laptop, walked to her window, and looked out at the Baltimore streets where Caleb had played as a child. A part of her wanted to immediately decline to protect the fragile equilibrium she had achieved. But another part? A part that sounded suspiciously like Pastor Wilson, whispered, "What if you're ready? What if it's time?" She picked up her phone and called Dr. Sullivan, who she still spoke with monthly. "I got an email," she said, "and I don't know what to do." "Tell me about it," Dr. Sullivan replied. And as Naomi explained, she could feel her therapist smiling through the phone. "This terrifies you," Dr. Sullivan said finally. It wasn't a question. "Absolutely terrifies me," Naomi confirmed. "Good," Dr. Sullivan said. "Fear means you're considering it. Fear means it matters. The question isn't whether you're scared. The question is, do you want to try? Naomi closed her eyes. She thought about Caleb, about his last words. You were so beautiful. She thought about the 12-year-old boy who had sat in the third row, bursting with pride for his sister. She thought about the countless hours she had spent rebuilding herself, one note at a time. One day at a time. Yes, she whispered. I want to try. The official invitation from the Kennedy Center arrived 2 weeks later, a formal letter on heavy cardstock that felt substantial in Naomi's hands. The Rising Phoenix series would feature 5 artists over the course of a season, each given a full evening to present their work. Naomi's performance would be in 6 months, ample time to prepare a 90-minute program. Ample time also to second-guess everything. The news of Naomi's invitation spread quickly through her community. Denise Rivers, who had spent the last 12 years working 3 jobs to make ends meet after losing so much, cried for an hour straight when Naomi told her. Jasmine, now married with 2 children, offered to help with anything Naomi needed. The congregation at New Hope erupted in applause during Sunday service when Pastor Wilson announced it. But alongside the celebration came concern. Dr. Sullivan scheduled extra sessions to help Naomi manage the stress. This is going to trigger things, she warned. The pressure. The memories of performing before the association with Caleb's death. We need to build coping strategies now, before you're in the middle of rehearsals and overwhelmed. They created a comprehensive plan. Naomi would continue therapy twice weekly instead of once. She would maintain her medication regimen, strictly no skipping doses. She would set boundaries with the media, limiting interviews and controlling her narrative. And most importantly, she would remember that she could say no at any point. The door to backing out remained open. I need you to hear this, Dr. Sullivan said during one session. If you get to the night of the performance and realize you can't do it, that's okay. You've already proven everything you need to prove by surviving what you've survived. This concert isn't about redemption because you have nothing to redeem yourself for. It's simply an opportunity. Nothing more, nothing less. But Naomi knew it was more than that. She couldn't articulate it fully, but somewhere in her gut, she understood that this performance represented something larger than her career or her past. It was about honoring Caleb, about proving that his death hadn't been the end of her story, about transforming her trauma into something that might help others. The question of repertoire consumed her first month of preparation. Traditional choices would be safe, a Bach prelude, some Chopin nocturnes, maybe a Beethoven sonata. But every time she sat down to work on classical standards, something felt wrong. The music was beautiful, technically challenging, but it felt like wearing someone else's clothes. It didn't represent who she was now. Pastor Wilson, as usual, saw the problem clearly. You're trying to go back, he said. But you can't. That Naomi is gone. So stop trying to resurrect her. Instead, introduce us to the Naomi who exists right now. And who is that? Naomi asked. A woman who knows suffering intimately. A woman who's been broken and put herself back together. A woman whose music now carries the weight of genuine experience. That's who should be on that stage. The idea that had been forming in Naomi's mind crystallized in that moment. She wouldn't perform a traditional classical program. Instead, she would create something new, a fusion of classical technique, gospel soul, and her own compositions. She would tell her story through music, not words. She would be vulnerable in a way that terrified her, but felt essential. When she emailed her proposed program to the Kennedy Center, she expected pushback. The Rising Phoenix series was part of the classical music program, and her proposed set list was decidedly non-traditional. But Victoria Chambers, who was serving as an artistic advisor to the series, championed it. "This is exactly what classical music needs," she wrote back. "Honest, personal, unafraid. Do it." Naomi quit her job at Whole Foods to focus entirely on preparation. It was a risk. Her savings were modest, but Pastor Wilson offered her a stipend in exchange for playing at the church and teaching piano to a few neighborhood kids. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover rent and groceries. She rented practice space at a local music studio, a small room with a decent upright piano, and walls thin enough that she could hear a violinist practicing in the adjacent space. Every morning she arrived at 7 and stayed until 1, breaking only for lunch. Then she would take a few hours off before returning for an evening session from 5 to 9. The regimen was punishing. Within 2 weeks, her hands developed blisters that turned to calluses. Her back ached from hours hunched over the keys. She dreamed in chord progressions and woke humming melodies she was working on. But slowly, painfully, the program came together. She divided the performance into 3 movements like a classical symphony, but entirely on her own terms. The first movement would be her interpretation of gospel and spirituals, the music that had first connected her to the piano and had helped heal her. Wade in the water swing, low sweet chariot. His eye is on the sparrow, but not arranged traditionally. She would weave in classical harmonies, complex rhythms, improvisational elements that transformed the familiar hymns into something that bridged worlds. The second movement would be the most challenging pieces by Black classical composers, musicians, who had been largely overlooked in her formal education. Florence Price's Piano Sonata in E minor. William Grant. Still's Three Visions. Margaret Bond's Troubled Water. Music that spoke to the African American experience, that carried histories of struggle and resilience that resonated with her own journey. The third movement would be entirely her own compositions, pieces she had written over the past year, including the one about Caleb, but expanded and developed into a suite called Letters to Mourning. 5 short works that captured different aspects of her healing grief, anger acceptance, hope, and finally gratitude. It was an ambitious program, nearly 90 minutes of music that demanded both technical precision and emotional vulnerability. Some days she felt confident she could pull it off. Other days, usually after a particularly difficult practice session, she was convinced she was delusional. The first major crisis came 6 weeks into preparation. Naomi was working on the Price Sonata, a beautifully intricate piece that required the kind of technical facility she had once possessed naturally, but now had to fight for. She was attempting a particularly difficult passage, her fingers stumbling over the rapid notes when frustration overwhelmed her. She slammed her hands down on the keys, creating a discordant crash that startled the violinist next door. "I can't do this," she said to the empty room. "I'm not good enough anymore. I'm fooling myself." She left the studio, walking aimlessly through Baltimore streets, her mind spiraling. All the old doubts came rushing back. She was damaged goods, a has-been, someone who should have stayed in her small, safe life instead of reaching for something she couldn't grasp. By the time she found herself at Dr. Sullivan's office unscheduled, she was having a full panic attack. Dr. Sullivan cleared her schedule and sat with Naomi until the panic subsided. "Talk to me," she said once Naomi could breathe normally again. "I'm not the pianist I was," Naomi said. "My technique is rusty. My hands don't move the way they used to. I keep making mistakes that 16-year-old me would have never made. How can I perform at the Kennedy Center when I'm a shadow of what I was?" "You're absolutely right, Doctor," Sullivan said, which surprised Naomi. "You're not the pianist you were at 16. That version of you had perfect technique, but no depth." She could play anything flawlessly, but had no idea what suffering felt like, what it meant to lose everything and claw your way back. The pianist you are now has something infinitely more valuable than perfect technique. You have truth. Truth doesn't matter if I can't play the notes, Naomi countered. Then don't play notes you can't play. Sullivan replied. Adjust the program. Simplify passages that are too difficult. Make it work for the pianist you are now, not the one you used to be. There's no rule that says you have to perform at the level you once did. The only rule is that you have to be honest. It was permission Naomi hadn't realized she needed. That evening, she went back to the studio and began reworking her arrangements. Passages that were beyond her current technical ability she simplified or eliminated. Pieces that felt too ambitious she replaced with simpler alternatives. She stopped trying to prove she was the prodigy she had been and started crafting a program that reflected the musician she had become. The result was something more intimate, more personal, and ultimately more powerful than anything she could have created at 16. 10 weeks before the Kennedy Center performance, Naomi woke to news that triggered her worst nightmares. A mass shooting had occurred at a high school in Texas. 15 people dead, including 12 students. Among them was a 16-year-old pianist who had been planning to audition for Juilliard that summer. The story was everywhere. News broadcasts, social media conversations overheard in coffee shops. And for Naomi, it was like being thrown back to that March evening 12 years ago. The details were different, but the essential horror was the same: young people dead for no reason, futures erased by gun violence, families destroyed. She tried to practice that morning but couldn't. Every time her fingers touched the keys, she heard gunshots. Every chord became the sound of Caleb falling. By noon, she was on her bedroom floor hyperventilating, unable to distinguish past from present. Jasmine found her there 2 hours later, having come to drop off groceries and getting no answer at the door. She called Dr. Sullivan, who came immediately. Together, they got Naomi to the hospital, where she was given medication to manage the acute panic, and kept for observation overnight. "This is it," Naomi said flatly when Dr. Sullivan visited the next morning. "I can't do the performance. I thought I was ready, but I'm not. I'm still too broken." Dr. Sullivan pulled a chair close to Naomi's bed. "Do you remember what I told you when we first started working together? Recovery isn't linear. You're going to have setbacks. Having a trauma response to a traumatic event doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human." "But the concert is in 10 weeks, Naomi said. "How am I supposed to get on that stage when I can't even practice without falling apart?" Maybe Dr. Sullivan said carefully. "This is exactly why you need to get on that stage. Not despite your pain, but because of it. Naomi, there are thousands of people suffering from trauma right now. People who think they're too broken to create, to contribute, to matter. What if your performance could show them that brokenness and beauty can coexist?" Naomi was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "I want to dedicate the performance to Caleb, and to that girl in Texas, and to everyone we've lost to gun violence. Would that be okay?" "More than okay," Dr. Sullivan replied. "It would be perfect." 2 days later, Naomi returned to the studio. She worked differently now, with more breaks, more gentleness toward herself. When memories threatened to overwhelm her, she would stop practice her grounding techniques and only continue when she felt centered. It was slower, more painstaking, but gradually the music came back, and she made a decision about her program. She would write one more piece, something she had been avoiding because it felt too raw. A composition specifically about Caleb, about that night, about gun violence and senseless loss. She would call it Caleb's Song, and it would be the centerpiece of her third movement, the most personal thing she had ever created. The composition took 3 weeks to complete. It began in darkness, dissonant chords that captured chaos and terror. Then it moved through grief, the melody fragmented and searching. Slowly, painfully, It found resolution not in major key happiness, but in acceptance, in the knowledge that love persists even when the beloved is gone. When she played the finished piece for Pastor Wilson, he was quiet for several minutes afterward. "That's the most honest music I've ever heard," he finally said. "It's going to destroy people, in the best possible way." As the performance date approached, media attention intensified. Victoria Chambers wrote a major profile in The Washington Post about Naomi's story, which was picked up by national outlets. Suddenly, Naomi Rivers was not just a pianist performing in the Rising Phoenix series. She was a symbol trauma survivor, mental health advocate cautionary tale about America's gun violence epidemic. The attention was overwhelming. Interview requests flooded in. Television producers wanted her for morning shows. Podcasters reached out. Documentary filmmakers expressed interest in following her story. Dr. Sullivan helped her set strict boundaries, one long-form interview with NPR, which would be released the week of the performance, and nothing else. No television, no social media presence, no exploitation of her trauma for content. But even with boundaries, the pressure was immense. Every article mentioned her past, dissected her breakdown, speculated about whether she could really pull off a Kennedy Center performance after so many years away from professional music. Some critics were supportive, excited about her unconventional program. Others were skeptical, dismissive, suggesting that the Rising Phoenix series was lowering its standards by including a novelty act. One particularly cruel review of her announced program, written by a traditionalist critic who had never heard her play, suggested that Naomi was trading on trauma rather than talent, and that gospel music had no place in a prestigious classical venue. The article went viral, sparking a heated debate about race classical music and who gets to define artistic legitimacy. Victoria Chambers wrote a scorching response, revealing for the first time that she too had lost a sibling to suicide and understood intimately what it meant to channel pain into art. Naomi Rivers is not exploiting her trauma, she wrote. She's transforming it. And if that makes traditional classical music gatekeepers uncomfortable, perhaps, that says more about the limitations of their imagination than the validity of her art. The public debate became so intense that Naomi stopped reading anything about herself. She deleted social media apps from her phone. She focused solely on preparation, letting Pastor Wilson and Jasmine handle communications with the Kennedy Center and media. But the pressure seeped in anyway. Ticket sales had exploded. The performance was sold out within hours of going on sale, with a waiting list of over 3,000 people. The Kennedy Center had to arrange for a simultaneous broadcast to their smaller theaters to accommodate demand. NPR would be recording the performance for later broadcast. The stakes, already high, had become astronomical. 3 weeks before the concert, Naomi developed a tremor in her right hand. Stress-induced, her doctor said nothing medically serious. But for a pianist, it was terrifying. She could play through it, but the tremor affected her precision, made rapid passages uncertain. More medication adjustments, more coping strategies, more nights lying awake, wondering if she had made a catastrophic mistake. Victoria Chambers visited Baltimore 2 weeks before the performance. Over coffee, she told Naomi something that helped more than any medication could. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said. "I didn't just nominate you because I thought you deserved an opportunity. I nominated you because I needed to hear you play. After my sister died, I couldn't listen to music for a year. When I finally could, everything felt false, too polished, disconnected from real human experience. Then I heard you at that church playing gospel with tears on your face, and I thought, that's it. That's what music is supposed to be. Honest." She leaned forward. "You're not performing for the critics or the traditionalists or anyone who thinks they know better. You're performing for people like me, like you, like everyone who's been broken and is trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together. That's your audience, and they're ready for you. The night before the concert, Naomi couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, alternating between excitement and terror. At 3 a.m, she called Dr. Sullivan, who answered immediately as if she had been waiting. "I can't do this," Naomi said. "Yes, you can," Dr. Sullivan replied. "But let me ask you something. Why did you agree to this performance in the first place, not the surface reasons, the deep reason?" Naomi thought about it. "Because Caleb loved watching me play. Because the last thing he said was that I was beautiful. Because I want him to have been proud of me even though he's gone." "Then play for him tomorrow," Dr. Sullivan said. "Not for critics, not for your career, not to prove anything to anyone else. Play for Caleb. That's the only audience that matters." Naomi finally fell asleep around 5 a.m. When she woke 3 hours later, her hands were steady. The tremor was gone. She felt for the first time in months something approaching peace. She spent the day with her family. They visited Caleb's grave together, bringing flowers and sitting in silence. Denise held Naomi's hand and whispered, "He's with you, baby. He's been with you all along." That evening, 2 hours before the performance, Naomi arrived at the Kennedy Center. The building was magnificent, all glass and red carpet and elegant lines. She was escorted to a private dressing room where a beautiful grand piano waited for her to warm up. Pastor Wilson arrived, then Jasmine and Denise, all dressed in their finest clothes. "How do you feel?" Pastor Wilson asked. Naomi looked at her hands, those hands that had been restrained in a hospital, that had trembled with trauma, that had slowly, painfully relearned how to create beauty. "Ready," she said, and she meant it. The dressing room at Kennedy Center was unlike anything Naomi had experienced. Elegant and spacious with soft lighting and a comfortable couch, it felt more like a luxury hotel suite than a backstage area. A small upright piano sat in the corner for warming up. Fresh flowers filled a vase on the vanity. A rack held the dress she would wear, a deep burgundy gown that Jasmine had helped her select. Elegant, but not ostentatious, something that felt like her. But all the luxury in the world couldn't quiet the storm in her mind. She sat at the upright piano, playing gentle scales, trying to settle her nerves. Her hands were steady now, but her breathing kept accelerating. Every few minutes, she had to pause and practice the grounding techniques Dr. Sullivan had drilled into her. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. There was a knock at the door. Pastor Wilson entered, carrying a small box. "I have something for you," he said. Inside the box was a program from her very first performance at New Hope Baptist Church when she was 6 years old. Someone had saved it all these years, the simple photocopied paper, with her name misspelled Naomi Rivers. "I wanted you to remember where you started," Pastor Wilson said. "Not Juilliard, not BAM, not any of the prestigious venues. A neighborhood church where a little girl played because the music moved through her like grace. That's who you are. That's who you've always been." Naomi held the program, her eyes filling. "What if I mess up? What if I freeze?" "Then you freeze," Pastor Wilson said simply. "And then you start again, Naomi. There is no perfect performance. There's only honest performance. Get on that stage and be honest. That's all anyone can ask." Another knock. This time it was Victoria Chambers holding a small envelope. "This came for you," she said. "It was dropped off at the box office an hour ago." Naomi opened it. Inside was a simple card with a message in handwriting she didn't recognize. "Dear Naomi, my daughter was the pianist killed in Texas last month. I heard about your performance tonight and wanted you to know that we'll be watching the live stream. Thank you for honoring her memory and for showing that even after unimaginable loss, beauty can still exist. With gratitude, Margaret Whitman." Naomi pressed the card to her chest, overwhelmed. This was why she was doing this. Not for critics or career, but for people like Margaret Whitman, people who understood that art could be a lifeline in the darkest moments. Jasmine arrived next, bringing Denise, who was already crying. "Mama." "The concert hasn't even started," Naomi said, but she was smiling. "I know, baby. I know," Denise said, dabbing at her eyes. "I'm just so proud. You went through hell and came out the other side. That's worth crying about." They sat together, the four of them. Naomi, her mother, her sister, and Pastor Wilson, in a circle holding hands. Pastor Wilson said a prayer, not asking for a perfect performance, but for honesty, for courage, for Caleb's spirit to be present. When he finished, Naomi felt centered in a way she hadn't all day. A stage manager appeared at the door. 15 minutes, Ms. Rivers. The walk from the dressing room to the stage felt infinite. Naomi moved through corridors lined with photographs of legendary performers who had graced these halls: Yo-Yo Ma Leonard Bernstein, Leontine Price. She was about to join that lineage, or at least share the same stage they had commanded. She could hear the audience now, the low murmur of 2,500 people, finding their seats, program pages, rustling the excited anticipation that precedes any performance. Somewhere in that crowd were her family, her therapist, people from New Hope Baptist, and strangers who knew her story and had come to witness what would happen next. The stage manager led her to the wings. From here, she could see part of the stage, the 9-foot Steinway grand piano, perfectly tuned, positioned in a spotlight that would soon be her entire universe. The house lights were still up, but they would dim soon, and then it would be time. Victoria Chambers appeared beside her. "I don't usually do this," she said, "but I wanted you to know something. Regardless of what happens tonight, you've already succeeded. You got here. That alone is extraordinary." "Thank you," Naomi whispered, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "I didn't believe in who you were," Victoria said. "I believed in who you became." The house lights began to dim. The audience noise faded to expectant silence. The stage manager held up 5 fingers. 4, 3, 2, 1. "Ms. Rivers," she said quietly, "you're on." Naomi took a breath. In her mind, she saw Caleb sitting in the 3rd row of the Baruch Performing Arts Center, his face glowing with pride. She heard his last words. "You were so beautiful." She stepped forward into the light. The stage was larger than she remembered from her brief afternoon rehearsal. The piano seemed miles away, though it was only 20 feet. The audience was a dark mass beyond the spotlight faces, invisible, but presence overwhelming. She could feel their attention like physical weight, every eye on her, every breath held. Her legs felt unsteady. Her hands, which had been steady in the dressing room, began to tremble again. For a moment, panic threatened. What was she doing here? She was a fraud, a broken woman pretending she could do something she had no right attempting. But then she reached the piano. She sat on the bench, adjusted her position, placed her hands on her lap. She looked down at the keys, those 88 keys that represented possibility and terror in equal measure. And she remembered something Pastor Wilson had told her weeks ago. When you sit at that piano, you're not alone. Every person who ever loved you, every ancestor who fought for you to have opportunities they never had, every soul touched by music, they're all there with you. Naomi closed her eyes. She thought of her mother who had cleaned houses so her daughter could have lessons. She thought of her teachers who had seen her potential. She thought of Dr. Sullivan, who had sat with her through the darkest hours. She thought of Pastor Wilson, who had helped her find music again when she thought it was lost forever. And most of all, she thought of Caleb. Sweet, joyful Caleb, who had loved her unconditionally, who had been so proud to be her brother, whose death had broken her, but whose memory had eventually helped heal her. "This is for you," she whispered so quietly that not even the front row could hear. "All of it. Every note. For you, baby brother." She opened her eyes. She lifted her hands. And she began to play. The opening piece of Naomi's program was her arrangement of Wade in the Water, a spiritual that had sustained enslaved people through unimaginable suffering that had guided them toward freedom, that had carried the message God's going to trouble the water. And in that trouble, there is liberation. The first chord was simple. E-flat major played softly, almost questioningly. It hung in the air of the Kennedy Center Concert Hall, and in that moment of suspension, something shifted. Naomi's trembling stopped. Her breathing steadied. The terror that had consumed her seconds ago dissolved into something else. Focus, intention, presence. She played the melody line spare and pure, letting each note speak before moving to the next. No rushing, no showing off, just the fundamental beauty of the hymn expressing itself. Then she began to build, adding harmonies, thickening the texture, introducing rhythmic complexity. Her left hand established a walking bass line, while her right hand elaborated on the melody, weaving in jazz-influenced runs that honored the tune's sacred roots while taking it somewhere new. The audience, which had been rustling and settling when she first sat down, fell into profound silence. Even the seasoned concert-goers, who had attended thousands of performances, found themselves leaning forward. This wasn't what they had expected. This was more intimate, more vulnerable, more immediate than typical classical fare. Naomi moved seamlessly into Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, but transformed. She played it in a minor key, slowing the tempo to a meditation. Each phrase became a question, a reaching toward something just beyond grasp. Then unexpectedly, she shifted into a fugue structure, weaving the melody through different voices, treating the spiritual with the same contrapuntal complexity Bach had brought to German chorales. It was a statement this music, often dismissed as simple or unsophisticated, contained the same intellectual and emotional depth as any European classical tradition. And Naomi was proving it not through argument, but through demonstration. The first movement continued with "His Eye is on the Sparrow," the song that had started everything when 6-year-old Naomi had walked to the piano at New Hope Baptist. She played it first, as she had then, simply purely with the straightforward faith of a child. Then she developed it, adding variations that became increasingly complex, showing the journey from innocent belief to tested faith, to hard-won spiritual maturity. By the time she reached the climax of this variation set, she was playing with technical virtuosity that rivaled any classical pianist. Rapid octave passages, intricate cross rhythms, harmonies that pushed the boundaries of tonality without losing the hymn's essential character. Her hands flew across the keys, but every note served the emotional narrative she was building. Between pieces, she didn't speak. She had decided not to introduce or explain her program. The music would have to communicate everything. The brief silences between works became charged spaces where the audience absorbed what they had heard before the next piece began. Amazing Grace came next, and this was where many in the audience began to weep openly. Naomi played it as a lament, drawing out the phrase that saved a wretch like me, until each word carried the weight of genuine confession. She knew about being a wretch, about needing grace, about being lost, and then found. It was all there in her interpretation, honest, and unashamed. The movement concluded with a medley of spirituals flowing one into another. Go down, Moses, steal away. Precious Lord, take my hand. Each one a story of suffering and hope, enslavement and liberation, despair and transcendence. Naomi wove them together into a tapestry that felt both ancient and urgently contemporary, as if these songs had been waiting for her to understand them fully, to play them with the authority that comes only from having lived through darkness and emerged. When the last notes of Precious Lord faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then applause erupted, but Naomi held up a hand. She wasn't finished. There could be no applause yet. The story was only beginning. The second movement was her riskiest choice pieces by Black classical composers, musicians, whose work had been systematically excluded from the canon despite its quality. She was making an argument about whose voices deserved to be heard in prestigious venues, doing it not with words, but with music. Florence Price's Piano Sonata in E minor began with a brooding intensity that grabbed the audience immediately. Price had written this work in 1932, a Black woman composer fighting for recognition in a world that told her she didn't belong. Naomi played it with fierce determination, channeling Price's struggle and her own into every phrase. The sonata's second movement, a tender andante, showcased Naomi's evolved approach to music. Her technique wasn't as pristine as it had been at 16. There were moments where her fingers didn't move with perfect precision passages where you could hear her working. But what she had instead of technical perfection was emotional truth. Every note mattered. Every phrase was shaped with intention. Every dynamic choice served the larger narrative. Margaret Bonds's arrangement of Troubled Water came next, a bridge between movement 1 and 2, between gospel and classical, between oral tradition and written score. Bonds had taken the spiritual and transformed it into concert repertoire without losing its soul. Naomi played it as a conversation between her classical training and her church upbringing, showing that these weren't separate worlds, but interconnected parts of a larger tradition. She concluded the second movement with selections from William Grant Still's 3 Visions. The second vision, Summerland, was particularly moving, a meditation on peace, on rest, on the idea that suffering eventually gives way to solace. Naomi played it as a prayer, as a promise to herself that the pain wouldn't last forever. The third movement was entirely her own compositions, and before she began, Naomi did something she hadn't planned. She spoke. This final movement, she said, her voice steady but soft, is dedicated to my brother Caleb Rivers, who was killed 12 years ago when he was 12 years old. It's also for Emma Whitman, who was killed last month in Texas. And for every person we've lost to gun violence, every dream interrupted, every song unsung. This is called Caleb's Song, and it's my attempt to say what I could never say in words. She returned her hands to the keys. What emerged was unlike anything that had come before. The piece began in darkness. Dissonant chords, harsh and unresolved, painted the sound of violence, of chaos, of a world torn apart. Naomi's face contorted with the effort of playing this section as if each chord physically hurt. This was the night of Caleb's death, rendered in sound confusion, terror, the moment when everything safe becomes dangerous. Then came the grief. The melody fragmented, searching for resolution it couldn't find. Single notes played softly like questions with no answers. Why? 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 The refrain repeated, each iteration slightly different, exploring every angle of loss. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. A new melody began to emerge, tentative at first, like first light after the longest night. This was the healing theme built on a simple ascending pattern that suggested hope without promising easy answers. It grew, developed, became more confident. Naomi had structured this section as a set of variations, each one representing a stage in her recovery. The hospital variation was slow and mechanical, depicting the numbing effect of medication, the endless routine of institutional life. The Dr. Sullivan variation introduced warmth, a second voice entering to support the main melody representing the relationship that had helped save her life. The gospel variation brought back elements from movement, one showing how the music of her childhood had become the pathway back to herself. And finally, the liberation variation built to a powerful climax, combining every theme she had introduced throughout the entire program into a triumphant synthesis. But the piece didn't end with triumph. After the climax, it settled into something quieter: acceptance. The final section was simple, almost stark. A melody that acknowledged pain without being consumed by it, that held loss and love simultaneously, that said, "This is the world, beautiful and terrible, and I choose to keep living in it." The last chord was C, major, pure and clear, allowed to ring until it faded into silence. Naomi kept her hands on the keys even after the sound was gone, head bowed, tears streaming down her face. For 3 seconds, the Kennedy Center was absolutely silent. 2,500 people held their breath, collectively stunned into stillness by what they had witnessed. Then someone in the back stood. Then someone else. Then the entire audience rose as one, and the applause began. The ovation wasn't polite concert applause. It was thunderous, visceral, the kind of response that happens maybe once in a lifetime, when an audience knows they've witnessed something extraordinary. People weren't just clapping. They were sobbing, embracing strangers, overwhelmed by what they had experienced. Naomi sat at the piano, unable to move. She had expended everything she had, every ounce of strength, every reserve of courage. The performance had emptied her completely. She wanted to stand to acknowledge the applause, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Victoria Chambers appeared at the edge of the stage, mounting the steps without being invited, and walked to Naomi. She extended her hand, helping Naomi to her feet, then stepped back and joined the standing ovation. It was a gesture of solidarity and respect that made the audience applaud even harder. Naomi managed a bow, then another. She looked out into the audience, no longer a faceless mass, but individuals. She could see her mother in the third row, Denise's face streaked with tears, hands clasped in prayer position. Beside her, Jasmine was openly weeping. Pastor Wilson had his eyes closed, swaying slightly as if still hearing the music. And then Naomi saw something that made her breath catch. Scattered throughout the audience were young people, teenagers and 20-somethings, many of them holding up their phones with flashlights activated, creating a field of stars in the darkness. It was the contemporary gesture of ultimate appreciation, usually reserved for pop concerts. But here they were doing it for her, for classical music, reimagined for the raw honesty of her performance. The ovation continued for 8 minutes. Ushers appeared with flowers, which Naomi accepted with shaking hands. She bowed 3 more times, each bow deeper than the last, a gesture of gratitude that felt inadequate for what the audience was giving her. Finally, the applause began to subside. Naomi walked off the stage on unsteady legs, disappearing into the wings. The moment she was out of sight, she collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed, gasping for air. "You did it," a voice said. Dr. Sullivan was there, having watched from the wings. "Naomi, you did it." The dressing room quickly filled with people. Family rushed in first, Denise holding Naomi so tightly it was hard to breathe, Jasmine crying and laughing simultaneously. Pastor Wilson simply nodded his eyes, saying everything that needed to be said. Victoria Chambers entered, followed by Kennedy Center officials and musicians who had been in the audience. Everyone wanted to tell Naomi what her performance had meant to them, how it had moved them, how it had changed something fundamental in their understanding of what music could be. "You didn't just play a concert," one renowned conductor told her. "You redefined what classical music can be in the 21st century." A young woman, maybe 19 or 20 somehow, made it backstage and approached Naomi. "I'm in treatment," she said quietly, "for PTSD. I didn't think I could ever be normal again, do normal things. But watching you tonight, I thought maybe I can. Maybe being broken and being whole aren't opposites." It was moments like this, more than the critical acclaim or the standing ovation, that made Naomi understand the true impact of what she had done. Later, when the room had cleared and only family remained, Naomi finally had a moment to process. "I keep waiting to feel triumphant," she told Dr. Sullivan. "But I mainly just feel exhausted and grateful and kind of numb." "That's normal," Dr. Sullivan assured her. "You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that it's over, your body is catching up. The emotions will come later, I promise." Representatives from 3 major record labels had already made contact, wanting to discuss recording contracts. Concert halls from around the world were expressing interest in booking her. The NPR recording would be broadcast nationwide next week. Everything Naomi had walked away from 12 years ago was suddenly available again, but different now on her own terms. "What do you want to do?" Jasmine asked. "This is your moment. You can have whatever you want." Naomi thought about it. "I want to go home," she said. "To my apartment in Baltimore. I want to sleep for about 12 hours. And then I want to play at New Hope Baptist on Sunday like always. That's what I want." The critical response to Naomi's performance was overwhelming. The Washington Post called it the most emotionally honest classical music performance of the decade. The New York Times dedicated a full-page review to it, describing how Naomi had shattered the artificial boundaries between sacred and secular, black and white, trained and intuitive, showing that these divisions serve no one but the gatekeepers. More importantly, the performance resonated beyond classical music circles. It became a cultural moment discussed on social media, shared in mental health communities, analyzed in academic journals. People who had never listened to classical music found themselves moved by Naomi's story and her music. Margaret Whitman, the mother who had sent the card, reached out again. She wanted to start a foundation in her daughter's name, focused on providing music education and mental health support for trauma survivors. Would Naomi consider being involved? Naomi said yes. In the weeks following the Kennedy Center concert, Naomi received thousands of messages, letters from trauma survivors who felt seen and validated, emails from music students who had been inspired to pursue their own voices rather than imitating established traditions, stories from parents who had lost children from people struggling with PTSD, from anyone who had ever felt broken and wondered if they could be whole again. One message stood out from a music professor at a historically black university. "You did what we've been trying to do for generations. You proved that our music, the music born from our suffering and our joy, belongs everywhere, including the most elite venues. You kicked down doors that have been locked for too long, but perhaps the most meaningful response came from Dr. Sullivan during one of their regular sessions. Do you remember what I told you years ago? That music wasn't your enemy, that it was there during Caleb's death, but also during every beautiful moment you shared with him." "I remember," Naomi said. "I was wrong," Dr. Sullivan continued. "Music wasn't just there. Music is you. It's how you process, how you heal, how you connect with yourself and others. You didn't return to music. You returned to yourself. And in doing so, you gave other people permission to do the same. 3 months after the Kennedy Center performance, Naomi released a recording of the concert. It sold far beyond anyone's expectations, debuting on the classical charts and crossing over to other genres. The album, titled Rising, won a Grammy for Best Classical Instrumental Solo. But more than commercial success, the recording became a touchstone for people in pain. Therapists reported playing it for clients struggling with trauma. Support groups used it in healing work. It was played at memorials for victims of violence. Naomi's music had transcended performance and become something larger, a testament to human resilience, a proof that beauty could emerge from devastation. Naomi stood in the living room of her Baltimore apartment, which hadn't changed much despite everything. Same secondhand furniture, same view of the street where she had grown up. She had turned down opportunities to move to New York or Los Angeles, preferring to stay rooted in the place that had formed her. The biggest change was the piano. Her old upright had been replaced by a beautiful grand, a gift from an anonymous donor, though Naomi suspected it was Victoria Chambers. She spent several hours here each day, composing, practicing, exploring. The Caleb's Legacy Foundation had officially launched providing music therapy programs for trauma survivors at 10 hospitals across the country. Naomi served on the board and taught masterclasses sharing not just technique, but philosophy, that perfection was overrated, that vulnerability was strength, that breaking open was sometimes the only way to let light in. She performed regularly now, but carefully. Maybe once-a-month venues, she chose programs she designed. She had discovered that she didn't need to be constantly in the spotlight to feel fulfilled. Music was once again a conversation rather than a competition, a meditation rather than a performance. Every Sunday, she still played at New Hope Baptist. The congregation had grown significantly. People came from across the city, now drawn by word of mouth about the prodigy who had returned to her roots. But Naomi insisted on keeping it simple: gospel hymns, traditional spirituals, the music that had saved her. Dr. Sullivan had retired from active practice, but remained in Naomi's life as a friend and mentor. They met for coffee, weekly conversations that ranged from music to philosophy to their shared understanding of loss. "You know what I realized," Dr. Sullivan said during one of these meetings? "You didn't need me to fix you. You needed me to bear witness while you fixed yourself." Pastor Wilson, now 72, still gave Naomi occasional lessons, though now they felt more like philosophical discussions than technical instruction. "You've learned what I hoped you'd learn," he told her. "That music isn't about impressing people, it's about telling the truth. And you, Naomi Rivers, you tell the truth every time you touch those keys." On the 12th anniversary of Caleb's death, Naomi visited his grave. She did this every year, but this year felt different. She brought her portable keyboard and set it up near his headstone, not caring that cemetery visitors might think she was strange. She played Caleb's song there alone, except for the birds and the wind and whatever remained of her brother in this place. When she finished, she sat quietly for a while, then spoke aloud. "Hey, little brother, it's been 12 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the end, about me being beautiful. I didn't believe it for a long time. I thought beauty died with you. But I think I understand now. You weren't just talking about the music. You were talking about being alive, about loving fully even when it hurts, about showing up even when you're scared. That's the real beauty, not perfection, not achievement, just being here, being present, being willing to feel everything, the pain and the joy together. I still miss you every day. I still wish you were here to see what I've become, what your death somehow helped me become. I wish you could meet the people I've helped, hear the music I've written, see the foundation we started in your name. But maybe you do see it. I don't know what I believe about that. I just know that when I play, I feel connected to something larger than myself. And whether that's God or the universe or just my own need for meaning, it includes you. You're in every note. You always will be. She packed up her keyboard and walked back to her car. The sun was setting, painting the Baltimore sky in shades of orange and purple. She thought about how many sunsets Caleb had missed, how many he would continue to miss. The unfairness of it would never stop hurting. But alongside the hurt was something else now, gratitude, for having known him at all, for the gift of his love, for the way his death, as terrible as it was, had eventually cracked her open enough to discover who she really was beneath the prodigy, beneath the expectation, beneath the trauma. She drove home as twilight deepened. In her apartment, she sat at her piano, the beautiful grand that had replaced the humble upright. She played softly, improvising, following wherever the music wanted to go. No audience, no recording, no performance, just her and the keys and the conversation they had together. The melody that emerged was gentle, questioning, hopeful. She had no idea where it was going, no plan or structure. She just followed it, trusting that it would take her somewhere worth being, the way music always had, the way music always would. Outside her window, the city moved through its evening rhythms. Somewhere people were suffering. Somewhere people were healing. Somewhere someone was discovering music for the first time, the way she had discovered it as a child, the way she had rediscovered it as an adult, broken and put back together. Naomi played on. Not because she had to, not because anyone was listening, but because this was who she was. Now, a woman who had survived, who had transformed her pain into something that helped others bear their own pain. A woman who understood that talent was less important than courage, perfection less valuable than honesty. A woman who had learned finally that the measure of a life wasn't what you achieved, but what you gave, wasn't how high you climbed, but how many hands you reached back to help up. The music filled her small apartment, spilled out the window into the Baltimore night. And somewhere perhaps Caleb was listening, smiling his little sunshine smile, proud of his sister, who had been broken and had put herself back together, who had been lost and had found her way home, who had been told she was beautiful and who had finally, after everything, learned to believe it.